is where we discuss the possibilities.
Hi guys, I'm Joe Klemczewski, founder of the Diet Doc, here with Dr. Kori Probst, our wellness director and health psychologist. We're going to talk today inside of the science or fiction category. And today, Kori, I want to jump into training. We don't talk about this quite as often as some other topics, but I did a lot of lecturing over the last few weeks, a couple times around the Midwest, but then over in Italy, and I really got a chance to put together some information I don't get to address very often. One of them being that the most research-based types of cardiovascular work people are doing now, or trying to say maybe better than others. Training, has many variables that are always being bantered about in terms of the historical trends and even what people are just promoting now. So I look at things like intensity, duration, frequency, all of those things. But today I want to focus on training intensity. Are you game?
Perfect. Yes.
All right. So little side note to our podcast, we don't script these things. Sometimes when one or the other person comes up with the topic, the other is just sitting there blindsided and wondering what's about to happen. And you're kind of in that seat today.
I am. I'm in that space right now.
So what's Joe going to ask me? I hope this works out. We can just edit everything. But here, one of my hobby horses with training has always been the variable of intensity. And I think it's kind of the, stepchild of the variables right now, where it's just not getting very much attention. People are not considering it as important. And I think it's probably the most important. And everybody today seems focused on frequency. So I see people squatting 3 times a week, 4 times a week, sometimes 5 times a week, even every single day. Studies, especially a case study done by Mike Zordos, which I've talked to him about personally. He said, don't do this. I put that right on the published study. Don't try this yourself.
They can't train that frequently if they're not focusing on intensity, right?
Well, he had people train 36 or 37 days, squatting to maximum failure every single day for 36 days. So you can, but the results will vary. It can break you or it can help you, but that's what we're going to talk about today.
Okay.
So first, as a setup, there's something that I don't even know if it's really called this, but threshold theory. I know it's a principle in biology, almost every part of life. That we operate on a continuum of thresholds. So you get a certain amount of stimuli, nothing's happening, then you reach a threshold and things go sky high. Okay? So let me give you a couple examples before we make this a training segment. I was just listening to a science podcast, and we are right now in the middle of the 6th major mass extinction that we can historically view. So starting a couple 100 million years ago, we can geologically look at what happened and why. And during these first 5 mass extinctions, anywhere between 80 and 97% of all life just died cataclysmically. The last one, of course, being the asteroid that hit the planet 65 million years ago, killed almost all the dinosaurs, right? Well, what most people don't know is we are in the middle of the 6th because we're causing it, and it's happening faster than the other ones. But in terms of that threshold, we're not seeing the tipping point quite yet. They're saying in the next 50 years, 50% of all life will be dead on our planet because of these things that are changing. So here's what threshold means.
What percentage of that percentage of humans?
Yeah. Personally, I hope kind of a lot. But, So here's an example of that, though. Maybe you've heard that the permafrost, in Iceland and Greenland, that contains all of the ice and all this stuff, there's tons of carbon, trapped life in there. And, it cycles here and there. We have hot summers, cool summers, that kind of thing. And so there's always reduction in ice flow, increases in ice density. But we're reaching a point where they say, I think there was a couple weeks last summer where the average temperature for the entire couple weeks jumped up like 47 degrees. and it's just melting so quickly that in at a threshold point, almost instantly, something like 34 trillion cubic tons of carbon is going to be released into the atmosphere, and then it's lights out, like the earth is dead. And those are kind of things that have happened in the past, where at one point the oceans froze. That was one of the mass extinctions. So you might think, nothing's really happening here, and then bam, you hit that threshold. So I'll give you a little bit more of a closer to home one for training. Muscle contraction.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to pick up your phone and you're using your bicep for that,
mm-hmm.
there are just thousands and thousands and thousands of muscle fibers there, but you don't need all of them. But the way the body recruits them is that a certain amount of them, however many muscle fibers and motor units your body needs, they will contract maximally. So a large percent are not contracting at all. The ones that are called on through your central nervous system to contract maximally. So that's another example of threshold. We reached a threshold need. Okay, so here's the exciting thing about training. I don't know if you'll remember this specifically, but we talked about cardio a few episodes ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, okay, here's the thing. You can toggle along and do some cardio, and maybe your heart rate's up a little bit and you're burning a few calories. But they also did studies and said, okay, let's measure the different levels of intensity.
Mm-hmm.
And when they got to a high intensity threshold where they did maximum, you couldn't possibly give one more ounce of effort for 8 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Then you got to rest for 12 seconds. So 8 seconds on, 12 seconds off. Where other forms of cardio and other measures of intensity did not measurably increase growth hormone or epinephrine, norepinephrine, so a measurement of actual body fat potential loss.
Mm-hmm.
When you did the high intensity, those measurements went up 1,000%.
Mm-hmm.
So I can be on my bike for an hour doing cardio, heart rate's 120, growth hormone, 0, flatline. Epinephrine, 0, flatline. Burn a few calories, have some activity, that's important. But as far as getting a training response, something that makes our bodies need to adapt,
mm-hmm.
you have to hit a certain threshold, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
makes
so
sense.
here's my beef with people who are ignoring intensity.
Okay.
I see people do this all the time. Hey, today I squat for the 4th or 5th time this week, and it's just working on technique. So today I just do 4 sets of like 60%. So I watch them at the end of their workout, and they do 10 reps, 4 sets, and not breaking a sweat, nothing. It's just to work on technique. It's to increase frequency. But
I haven't thought about that, but I'm listening.
No, go ahead. Throw in your thoughts there.
My first sort of thought with that is, but the technique is going to be different depending on the intensity of the exercise. If you have a ton of weight on the bar because you're going for your 1 rep max, that's a different practice in form than having 60% of your max weight on there and quote unquote practicing technique. Okay.
Well, and that's why, that's exactly why I say when somebody is very new to training, certainly practice technique. That's important.
Yeah.
Especially when load, can be lower. I think back to my days as a physical therapist, and when somebody has an injury and you're only doing some sets for range of motion or very light load because you have to test the injured tissue, you're rebuilding integrity. Yeah, you can do physical therapy every day, maybe twice a day. You're working that muscle or that joint. But as the load gets heavier and more intense, there's naturally more recovery that has to take place. So then you don't train as often. You reduce frequency. So there was 1 or 2 particular studies. One of the ways I created all these PowerPoints for my lectures this summer was to pick out some of the better contrasting pieces of research so we can really look at this. And one particular person looked at power, hypertrophy, and strength work, specifically through hormone response. That was one of the things I wanted to test because, again, I wanted to see where that threshold was. So they had one group squatting, and they would call them the power group. They did 8 sets of 6 reps at 45% of their rep max. So power is working on explosion. So if you're squatting, it's coming up strong. So not a heavy load, 45%, but really working on explosiveness. And then at the end, they would still do a 1 rep max.
Okay.
So then you had the strength group. So they're working at a little bit lower rep range, 4 reps, 6 sets, but they were doing their sets at 88%. So you had 45%, 88%. Then you had the hypertrophy group. So they're working in 10 rep sets, very classic design, 10 rep sets. And they were working at 75%. So not quite the 88% for just 4 reps, but they were doing 75% for 10 reps. So when they measured cortisol response, I see that look on your face. I need to make sure that these numbers.
Well, you know how I'm great at math.
Right. Okay. No, that's great to review. I'm glad I got that cue. So remember power, like just explosiveness. So they were doing 6 rep sets with only 45% of their 1 rep max.
Yep.
Then they would max out, to really test that.
Okay.
So 45% of max, 6 reps. Strength, they went down to 4 reps, but they went up to 88% of their 1 rep max. So a lot of heavy work. You're recruiting much more muscle fiber, motor unit, control is executing much more rapidly.
Right.
Then you had the hypertrophy group, which were 10 reps, but at 75%. So if you can imagine 10 reps at 75%, you're failing probably. I mean,
yeah, and I'm thinking time under tension and with the increased reps when the intensity isn't that much lower than the 88% people. Okay, I'm listening.
So you got that. I have some of my notes here too, so I don't mess up these numbers.
Yeah.
But with cortisol, with the power group, 0 change, which means a measurement of cortisol would say, okay, how much stress were these people really under, physiological stress? So no change at all.
But that doesn't surprise me.
Okay, yeah, because it's 45%,
Right.
6 reps, I can do that, nothing. Interestingly, the strength group saw a negative response, which could be negligible, but a reduction of about 50% on average. So it's almost like, you do that and then your body's taking a vacation. It's like, I kind of like that heavy work. I'm fine.
Yep.
But the hypertrophy group, they average more than 150% increase, all the way up to almost some subjects up to 300% increase in cortisol, which means, okay, your body is saying that was not fun. I'm going to create an environment now where we have to adapt. And then, of course, correlationally, if you have that kind of adaptation response triggered, that's going to happen. So again, in power and strength, testosterone did not go up at all. So you can train, you can go work on your technique sets, you can train, even strength, train aggressively for strength, only getting 4 reps, 88%, no change in cortisol, no change in testosterone. But the group doing the hypertrophy work, because it's high intensity, their testosterone they range between 26 and almost 100% increases in testosterone. So all of that to say, just like I used those environmental examples, and even the cardio, that was profound. I mean, think of, no biochemical reaction for adaptation. And then with high intensity cardio going up to 1,000% increases in growth hormone and epinephrine.
Okay. Yep.
So with this, my conclusion would be using this one variable in line with also duration and frequency. If you want positive change, which means you want increased muscle size, increased muscle strength, increased ability to recruit muscle tissue when you need it neurologically, you have to reach a threshold response that keeps you progressing forward, right? the fastest way to do that is going to be through that chemical change of the environment. Because if your body is triggered through stress, you need to adapt. That's where progress occurs. That's where anabolism occurs.
Yep.
And so again, I go back to exactly what you said, which was perfect because you didn't even know what we're going to be talking about today. When you have that increased time under tension with enough weight and enough effort, you trigger all that to happen. So what if we upped the ante even more? What if we increased intensity to an even higher level? So now maybe it's more sets or more reps. You're going into failure with a spotter. So now you're doing, partner assisted reps. Other studies show, just like that growth hormone response went to 1,000% with high intensity cardio, you get the higher response. And so here's what's interesting. I'm a fan of periodization, right?
Yes.
Not just the classic periodization, which is where an athlete says, okay, I'm going to work for 3 months on off-season strength, then on conditioning, then on this, but micro units of change. So you have microcycling inside of mesocycles, inside of your entire macro training cycle and all of that. So there's an interesting book. I want to make sure I give these guys credit. It's through Human Kinetics. Bampa and Buzzacelli. I was just in Italy. I should know that. Bampa and maybe Buzzacelli. 2018, Human Kinetics, they wrote the book Periodization, Theory and Methodology. So brand new book. It has some incredible information and research, and especially slides. And I know this is going to be hard to do, but this shows the representation of threshold, where you are you have a training response, and then you have that negative stimulus where you have stress, and then depending on how much intensity you have, shows you how deep you have to go, and then how the correlational supercompensation would then occur. And so if you have these little bumps, let's say you are training, with great frequency, but not that much intensity, there's hardly any training response. And so there's hardly any, if at all, any supercompensation. Right. If you just obliterate your body, then you need an increase. So maybe somewhere in the middle, and this is also what research shows, there's a way to trigger enough of a response and then you catch it at the right place. Instead of squatting, benching, training, whatever, every day, you actually give yourself enough time to recover. And then on that up cycle, you train again and again and again. So this book by Human Kinetics, a phenomenal graphic representation of how that actually happens. So one question for you, just to kind of bring this into another analogy. Psychologically, we'll go into your domain.
Okay.
Isn't it true? Let's say stress, anxiety. You can take enough stimulus, like you're just okay. This is hard. This is hard. This is hard. But you reach a stimulus that reaches a threshold, and something's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So
it's a great analogy. Training is an awesome analogy for living, for life, for adaptation, for growth and learning. Yes.
So, put a positive spin on what can happen. Like with mindfulness, meditation, counseling, just new knowledge.
Yeah.
It's almost like training this, like your muscle tissue, so you get better at that response, and you just don't have these haywire things happening, right?
No more haywire stuff. Well, I won't say no more. I mean, like you said, we all have a threshold, but we all have this, and this is not my term, Dr. Dan Siegel terms it a window of tolerance, right? Just like our bodies have a window of tolerance that we need to work within and can optimize, so can we do that same thing with our minds and how we adapt to the world emotionally. So we have a window of tolerance in terms of what we're capable of adapting to and being flexible around emotionally, mainly. You know, one thing I like to say, because everyone goes into the gym and they're like, bring on the pain. You know, they're excited about bring on the pain. But in life, all we're trying to do is avoid the pain, avoid the discomfort. We love it when we come out of a training session and the next few days we're sore, you know, because we challenged ourselves in the gym and we increased the intensity level voluntarily. But then in life, the circumstances that come about, we're trying to push away and we're saying, no, I don't want that. And it should be different. And, you know, why me? So if we can adopt sort of the same mentality and approach in our lives and with our emotions as we do with our training, we're going to be setting ourselves up more effectively and optimally to become more agile, more flexible, stronger, have greater endurance, if we want to really kind of align the terms between strength and living, or training and living.
And I think to your point exactly, that when you have an intentionality to it, you know why you're doing something, and this is the point in time where I'm training. It's hard, there is some pain, but I'm doing it, so I'm fortifying my body or my brain in a certain way to be more resilient. I'll summarize it like this, because I think this will make sense to a lot of people. We know protein synthesis. You know, you could eat 5 grams of protein, 10 grams of protein, 15 grams of protein, or 2 or 3 grams of branched chain amino acids, or 1 gram of leucine, and nothing happens. There's no response. You have to hit a threshold response where your body says, whoa, there's a lot of amino acid here. Let's start protein synthesis. Let's start repairing cells and so forth. So we talk about this all the time with protein. You know, what's the protein threshold, the positive nitrogen balance in the bloodstream? And we've tried to even isolate down to single amino acids like leucine. How can I get a protein synthesis response through that threshold? But here's what's interesting. When we constantly titrate amino acids, we eat protein around the clock, around the clock, around the clock, our body gets used to that like any substance. And now it takes more to get a response, to get the response we want. So if I'm in the gym training, always doing squats 4 days a week, 5 days a week, or 7 days a week for 36 days, there's going to be a point in time where my body has adapted to that new baseline. And now I have to do even more to get that threshold response. So we have to look at some of these models of periodization and say that, yes, frequency is fine. I have to know when to train and how often, but what level of intensity is going to give me enough training response, and then I need enough time to recover. So all of that 20, 25 minutes in podcast just to say that intensity, I think,
matters. Intensity matters.
It drives the other variables. If you want to understand how much duration you should have in a workout, or how much frequency in your week, how many days should you train each body part, it really hinges on intensity.
I love it.
Awesome. So, all right, Kori. Next time we'll talk more about psych stuff.
No, this is good, because I use this analogy all the time, so it was perfect.
All right. So science or fiction, we'll say that one is a wrap, guys. And as always, we thank you for your comments. A lot of the times you guys give us these great ideas, which we need to keep content moving in the direction that you want it to go. So thank you for that, and we will catch you next time.
Thanks, guys.